Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to do another dyeing experiment. I have done a series of cake dyeing videos on the ChemKnits tutorial channel, but we've never dyed a cake of yarn starting with a wet cake. I've always started with the cake dry. So I'm curious to see what kind of colors we'll get when we pre-soak the cake first. So I did not measure the amount of water that I put in the pot. It's currently cool water. I decided that I am going to pre-soak it in the pot just so that way I can make sure that I get the water levels correct. On another video on the channel, someone was like, what is a cake of yarn? The reason why I call this a cake of yarn rather than a ball of yarn is that it is shaped more like a cake than a ball. I wound this on a ball winder that I got from Knit Picks. So I am going to increase the amount of water in the pot so that there is enough to cover the cake of yarn. And to help it be submerged, I'm going to place this bowl on top. It'll help get all the air out of the yarn. And I am going to let this soak for a bit, 30 minutes or so that way, you know, all the liquid goes into the ball of yarn. The yarn used in this video is a machine washable fingering weight wool. It is 75% merino, 20 and 25% nylon. The cake of yarn pre-soaked in the water a bit longer than I had initially intended, mainly because when you have a 6-month-old at home, you know, things happen that you can't control. Now that I've removed the cake, but you can see that I did not wring out any of the water, I just placed it over into a secondary container. I am going to turn on the heat of the dye bath and add some vinegar. I'm going to add two tablespoons of white vinegar and stir this up. And while we're bringing this to a simmer, I am going to add the dye. Now, unsurprisingly, having a baby has made some things go slower. But I have had some dye sitting around that is left over from a bunch of different dyeing projects. So I believe in here there's a mix of Kool-Aid, of food coloring, all kinds of stuff from a number of different dyeing experiments. So we've got this burgundy-ish color bath. And you know, I saved the stuff because I was intending to use it after I had done the dyeing projects, but you know, being really pregnant kind of got in the way. So here I'll dip a paper towel to give you a sense of the color. It is pretty dilute, but it's, you know, got a lot of red in it. I believe there's probably some black food coloring in there as well. And I have this McCormick's blue that has just a tiny amount of dye left in it. And I am going to add this solution by adding some of the dye bath directly into the container and dropping it back out. Just to add a little more of a blue tone. So there's really no color in particular that I'm expecting here. I'm just expecting there to be some variation throughout the skein. But like in the other cake dyeing videos, we will bring this up to temp, to a light simmer, and then carefully add the cake of yarn. It is now time for my favorite part, adding the yarn. Now you want to be careful so you don't burn yourself. Or I should say I want to be careful so I don't burn myself. I think I'm going to enter the cake slowly and kerplop. And gently shift that back to the middle. All right, now we go. Now, there are some things that could go wrong. It's possible the dye will penetrate the yarn really fast and we won't see much variation of color. You know, we might not see very much breaking at all. Or we could see, rather than breaking, we could see tones of this maroon burgundy color all the way through, which would also be as pretty. But those two situations really have more to do with the content of the dye versus the fact that this is wound into a cake. "10 minutes have elapsed." Oh, funny, can you see it bubbling through the center? I wound this really loosely. That's funny. The color is starting to clear. Oh, actually, you can't really see it at all on the spoon. When before I could see a lot more color, but there's still a bit of color in there. And at least we know it has not totally uniformly absorbed because there is a lighter patch in here. But again, you know, I don't want to peek in the fibers because I don't want to like spoil anything that's happening on the inside. That's part of the fun of the cake dyeing. So we will see what we get. All right. Whoops. Another 10 or so minutes have elapsed and the water is basically clear at this point. So I am going to turn off the heat and, you know, we can see that we do seem to be having some gradient go towards the center, but I have no idea what it's going to look like or what the bottom looks like, and I'm really excited to find out. But first we will let this cool in the bath a bit. Alright, it is a bit cooler in the pot. So now with the help of my big spoon, I am going to pull it out. And as I move it, you can see that there's definitely some sections of lighter color towards the interior. You can see like over there and then even in the center. So, you know, how far the color penetrated, it's hard to say. Ooh, fun! Okay, so you can't see that, but over here, I see that there's some blue in the center. That's cool. The whole cake has kind of collapsed. But I don't want to play with it too much because I don't want to risk felting any of the fibers. Even if they are machine washable, I would still machine wash it on cold. We will let this sit and cool and then we will wash the yarn. So the cake of yarn is completely cool, and so I'm going to wash it with this cool water and liquid dish soap until I rinse out any excess dye and the water runs clear. But you can see from having it dunked in here, there's really no color coming out in the wash water, so that's good. But you can see that, ta-da, we definitely got some white in the center for once. So that's interesting. Now it could be that this yarn had a lot more reds in it, and so those struck really fast. And the reason why we have a tiny bit of blue penetration is that I added that blue at the very end. But this will still be a very fun colorway, and I cannot wait to see how it turns out. So after I'm done washing the yarn, I'm going to let it dry a bit in cake form, so that way I won't damage the fibers too much when I wind it into a skein on my Nitty Knotty. To help it dry a little faster, I put the cake of yarn on top of a cookie sheet over a bowl of water to allow the water to drain out. The cake of yarn is mostly dry, and so I'm about to start winding it on the Nitty Knotty, but I just wanted to point out some things about the yarn. One, I love these little white dots that formed in a regular pattern where the yarn crosses over each other. And I can imagine that these are only going to get bigger as we go deeper. This is where the top of the ball was, and so we've got some paler pink in here versus the deep burgundy that we have on the outside. If we peek towards the inside of the ball, you'll see that we do have some white. And it is ringed in a bit of pale blue. So, we'll see how this looks as I wind it up. We're getting towards the center of the cake, and I think it's pretty cool that half of it has this bluish in it and the other half is a lot more white. It makes for a really fun mottled effect. We are about to unwind the last little bit, and you can see the color is pretty consistent towards the center, with there being some dark flecks of burgundy in with the blue and white, and I think it's really cool. If the cake had been wound tighter, some of this end yarn would not have been exposed on an edge, and then we would not necessarily have the dark burgundy go throughout. But I'm really excited, and once it's dry and off the Nitty Knotty, I will show you what it looks like in the end. Voila! Here is the finished yarn. I would say that pre-soaking the cake prior to dyeing didn't make a ton of difference with the depth of color penetration to the ball of yarn. I would say most of the burgundy is concentrated on about a quarter of the yarn, and then the rest is, got hints of blue, white, and then burgundy reoccurring. And so it's quite pretty, but very subtle. And the effect is pretty similar to what I got with some of my other cake dyeing experiences. I am very pleased with the result. I have other ideas for playing with the cake dyeing technique in the future, but for now, each time I do another experiment, I learn a little bit more. Thank you for joining me in this dyeing experiment. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits.